The US 75mm gun tank gun M2 and the later M3 were the standard American tank guns of the Second World War, used primarily on the two main American medium tanks of the war, the M3 Lee and the M4 Sherman. The lightweight M6 and M5 variants were developed to equip the M24 Chaffee and the B-25 missile bomber respectively. The M3 was also used on the prototype M7 medium tank platform. History. The 75mm tank gun has its origins in the famous French cannon de 75 model 1897 field gun of World War I fame, which was also adopted by the United States and used well into World War II as the 75mm M1897 field gun. Both the tank and field guns fired the same range of 75x350R ammunition. The primary round was the M48 high explosive. This 6.76 kg round traveled at 625 meters per second and contained 1.5 pounds of TNT filling and choice of super quicker delay with 0.05 or 0.15 seconds of delay fuse. Square was the standard setting with PD used against structures, gun positions, lightly protected vehicles. The field gun origins of the ordnance and ammunition ensured that the M2 3/6 series He round was highly effective for its caliber. The M48 was available in two versions: standard a supercharge, which increased the propellant charge for greater muzzle velocity versus 1,470 feet per second, and range. Other important rounds fired by the 75mm tank guns were the T30 canister shot for use against troops in the open at short range. This was essentially a giant shotgun shell full of large numbers of steel balls. Canister was used primarily in the Pacific. There was also the M88 base ejecting smoke round and the M89 white phosphorus round, which proved highly effective in the barrage fighting around Normandy. Finally, there was the armor-piercing, for which two different rounds were provided. The first armor-piercing round was the 6.32 kg M72 APT, a plain uncapped AP round whose performance dropped off as range increased due to poor aerodynamics. M72 was replaced by the 6.63 kg M61 and later the improved M61A1 APC shell. This was actually an APCT type, or rather an armor-piercing cap with tracer filled with a small quantity of high explosive. The aerodynamic ballistic cap acted as a windscreen and improved ballistic performance, maintained velocity, and retained penetration at longer ranges. The armor-piercing cap, made of a softer metal, helped to prevent shell shatter at higher velocities and against sloped and face-hardened armor. Once the projectile had penetrated the target, of small explosive charge at the base of the shell would detonate, shattering the shell, and increasing damage inside the enemy vehicle. The tracer helped in aiming of a second shot. In practice, the majority of M61 rounds were shipped without the explosive filler. M61 had a muzzle velocity of 617 meters per second and was credited with the ability to penetrate 3.3 inches of rolled homogeneous armor plate at 500 yards range, which was a quite acceptable performance by the standards of 1942. This ammunition type proved lethal to the Panzer III and IV, as these tanks were protected by a maximum of 50 mm of FHA with little slope, which the 75mm M3 was capable of penetrating from 1,500 meters. With the March 1942 introduced a USFG iteration of the Panzer IV, produced through June 1943, the Panzer IV was rearmed with the 48 caliber barrel-length KWK-40 gun. and its frontal hull armor increased up to 80 mm, but its turret and gun mantlet retained their 50 mm thickness. This was compensated somewhat by the M4 Sherman's improved armor over the earlier M3 Lee, making up for the 75 mm M3's diminishing battlefield dominance. Bukvoed estimated that the M4's glacis was impenetrable to the KWK-40 when standing at a 30-degree side angle, while the 75 mm M3 could penetrate the AUSFG's hull from 100 meters in the same situation. By July 1944, complaints started to pour in about the inadequate anti-tank performance of the M4 medium tanks fitted with the 75 mm M3 gun. During the breakout from Normandy, American and British forces encountered the new generation of heavy German tanks and armored vehicles such as the Panther tank, Tiger I tank and Jagd Panzer Iv tank destroyer in quantity for the first time. These vehicles had thick frontal armor that proved largely immune to the M61 projectiles fired by the M3 tank gun and severely tarnished the reputation of the M4 medium tank. The Western Allies countered by equipping increasing numbers of M4 medium tanks with the 76 mm gun M1 for the Americans and the Ordnance QF-17 pounder for the British Sherman Firefly M4 variant. These guns offered much improved performance against tanks, but because the higher explosive rounds were inferior to those of the 75 mm guns, the 76 mm guns never completely replaced the older models. British tanks in the early years of World War II relied on high-velocity, smaller caliber anti-tank guns such as the Ordnance QF-2 pounder and Ordnance QF-6 pounder for their primary armament. As tank guns, these had the great disadvantage of either not having a truly effective high-explosive round or not even having a HE round at all. The British, after experiencing the effectiveness of the American 75 mm tank guns in the infantry support role, opted to adopt the American caliber and ammunition by the expedient of boring out the 6-pounder tank gun to make the Ordnance QF 75 mm. By 1944 this had become the standard British tank gun, equipping the Cromwell tank and Churchill tank for the campaigns in northwest Europe. Variants: M2 used on the early M3 Lee. Barrel length 31 calibers. Muzzle velocity 588 meters per second with M72 AP shell. Shell weight 6.32 kilograms. Armor penetration 64 mm of face-hardened armor, 76 mm of rolled homogeneous armor. Longer derivative of the M2. Equipped American and British vehicles such as the M4 Sherman, the later models of the M3 Lee and the Churchill 3 IV. U.S. Army also experimented with mounting of the M3 on various wheeled carriages for use as anti-tank gun, but the program was cancelled due to lack of requirement. Barrel length 40 calibers. Muzzle velocity 619 meters per second with M72 AP shell. Shell weight 6.32 kilograms. Armor penetration 72 millimeters of FHA armor or 88 millimeters of RA armor. Muzzle velocity 617 meters per second with M61 APC shell. Shell weight 6.63 kilograms. Armor penetration 77 millimeters of FHA armor, 76 millimeters of RA armor. The 75 millimeters aircraft gun M4 is a modification of the M3 gun which is found in medium tanks. It differs from the M3 gun only in having a seat for the spline machined in the tube. It was mounted on the M6 mount, a lightweight version of the M3 with a lighter thin-walled barrel and a different recoil mechanism that was used in the B-25H missile bomber. Uses the same ammunition and has the same ballistics as the M3. A version derived from the T13E1 for the M24 Chaffee. Barrel length 39 calibers. Muzzle velocity 619 meters per second with M72 AP shell. Shell weight 6.32 kilograms. Armor penetration 72 mm of FHA armor or 88 mm of RA armor. Muzzle velocity 617 meters per second with M61 APC shell. Shell weight 6.63 kilograms. Armor penetration 77 mm of FHA armor or 76 mm of RA armor. Penetration comparison.